Everyone asked me to do it, so here it is. Today I'm going to beat Pokemon Emerald with only Gulpin. This is not going to be fun, because I hate the fluctuating growth rate. If you don't know, it is the growth rate that takes the maximum possible experience to get to level 100. It levels up very quickly in the early game, and then exceedingly slowly once your Pokemon gets to a high level. And I'm expecting that's exactly what I'm going to have to do with Gulpin, since this mono poison type is not very good. It has 70 HP, 40 speed, 43 attack and special attack, and 53 defense and special defense. Today I've gone with a rash nature, increasing my special attack and decreasing my special defense. Immediately this seems like it doesn't make sense because poison moves deal physical damage in Generation 3. And when I look at Gulpin, it seems like it would be better with physical attacks, but that isn't the case. When we look at this thing's move pool, it actually gets access to a lot of special coverage. It starts with Pound, then through level up learns Yawn, Poison Gas, Sludge, Amnesia, Encore, Toxic, Stockpile, Spit Up, Swallow, and Sludge Bomb. At least Game Freak was kind enough to give this thing same type attack bonus poison moves. Through TM and HM is where it gets access to all of its coverage. Water Pulse, Bullet Seed. I've gone with Hidden Power Fire, Ice Beam, Giga Drain, Solar Beam, Shadow Ball, Shockwave, and Sludge Bomb. Then through the tutors, it gets access to an even wider array of moves, including the 3 elemental punches and rollout. I did not expect to have access to this kind of coverage. I also had to make 2 critical choices before the playthrough started. I am going with a female Gulpin. Look at those little lips. Maybe it's gonna need to attract some Pokemon later on into the game. And I had to choose between abilities, Liquid Ooze and Sticky Hold. They're both kind of useless in solo challenges, but I decided to go with Liquid Ooze, which inflicts damage to Pokemon that use moves like Giga Drain or Leech Life against Gulpin. You can see this interaction play out here with Nincada using Leech Life on Gulpin, taking damage instead of healing itself. Just outside of the forest, I pick up the TM for Bullet Seed, which gives me an answer to the first gym leader, Roxanne. But I'm not quite ready to fight her yet. I grab the Quick Claw. This could be useful for Gulpin since it's very slow, and there aren't that many held items in the early game, so I'll use it for now. Inside the gym, I fight all of the trainers because their Geodude give fast experience when I'm using Bullet Seed. Due to the fluctuating growth rate, Gulpin is able to level up all the way to 15 before I'm ready to take on Roxanne. I get a 3 hit against the first Geodude, which is enough to knock it out in 1 turn. Next, I get another 3 hit, finishing the second Geodude, moving on to the Nose Pass. I decided to go for Yawn against it. It lowers my speed with Rock Tomb, and then starts using its other 3 moves. So the Nose Pass isn't really a threat anymore. The Nose Pass is holding an Oran Berry, and Roxanne has 2 potions. One nice thing about Bullet Seed is that if luck aligns, sometimes the enemy won't use their potions or their berry because you started attacking them at a certain amount of health. I don't get lucky today with damage, but sleep does last for a really long time, probably because Roxanne's spamming a bunch of potions. Eventually her ace goes down and I earn myself the first badge, and a 10% boost to my attack stat. North of Rustboro City, before Rust Turf Tunnel, I have the chance to learn Amnesia at level 17. I decided to put this in the place of Yawn since that sleep-inducing move is not particularly good, and I think improving my special defense is going to be important for Watson. I fight the rivals south of the city. He's pretty simple to take care of. I'll mention here that he does have Mudkip. It's going to eventually be a ground type, which will be super effective against the poison type. It has Mudslap during this battle, but his AI has no idea what it should be doing, so instead he goes for Bide. Okay, small advantage for Gulpin catching HM users, because I can weaken the Tailo since it resists Bullet Seed. Sometimes this thing takes many balls to catch, in this case it only takes 3. On Dewford Island I pick up the Silk Scarf and then make my way into the Poke Fan Club. I'm just doing this for illustrative purposes, because after I defeat the 5th gym, a guy will spawn in here that gives the player Sludge Bomb, but right now he isn't available. Inside the gym I fight the trainers, doing more training. I'm trying to level Gulpin up as much as possible because I do anticipate that Watson is going to be pretty challenging, but Brawly should be a walk in the park. Up first is Machop. The poison type resists the fighting type. All of Brawly's moves deal fighting type damage. The only possibility for a loss here, I think, is getting very unlucky or playing poorly. Machop can set up with Bulk Up, then it's probably still best for it to use Seismic Toss. He's just going to be able to heal more easily because I'm inflicting less damage per turn. But I have a way around physical damage. I can use Bullet Seed for special damage if I really want. It takes me a while to knock out his lead, and I get a critical hit, speeding things up a little bit. Now, the Meditite I would have to mess up against because it only has Focus Punch for damage. As long as I spam Sludge, I'm going to knock it out for free, leaving only the Makuhita. Sludge isn't doing very much. I eventually poison, but Vital Throw is no threat to Gulpin. Unless Brawly is able to heal long enough, but he isn't, and after Reflect fades, Sludge does enough damage to knock out the Makuhita. On Slateport Beach, I pick up a Heart Scale. I was thinking that these would be useful for Gulpin to get moves like Amnesia or Encore back later into the game, but it turns out I was wrong. While doing training on the beach, I have a chance to learn Encore, and I think this move is going to be critical for defeating Watson, so I teach it in the place of Pound. My type coverage is not great now with only Sludge and Bullet Seed remaining as damage dealing moves. As you can see here, I don't have very many good options against Zubat. Luckily Sludge still deals a decent amount of damage, and because of the fluctuating growth rate, I'm very over leveled. After clearing the museum north of Slateport City, I go into the Trick House to collect one rare candy. This is critical for fluctuating growth rate Pokemon. Unfortunately though, because of how bad the experience curve is, especially at high levels, I am going to want to save these candies until the last possible moment. Typically in Pokemon Emerald, I like to use my candies before fighting Tate and Liza or before fighting Sydney, depending on where the Pokemon struggles and how strong they are. But with Gulpin, I think I'm going to have to do multiple attempts at the League to level up before I want to use my candies. There are 15 that I obtain in regular Pokemon Emerald playthroughs, so that means I would have to be level 85 before using the first candy if I really want to play around the growth rate in an optimal way. However, as you're going to see, once I get to the 50s and 60s, I am going to be leveling up so slowly that using candies is going to be a very seductive proposition. Gulpin knows everything about seductive propositions. Look at those cute little lips once again. Believe me, they are going to be useful. Up until this point in the playthrough, I have fought pretty much every trainer. This is something people don't talk about a lot in Pokemon games. Maximum battles. I'm essentially running maximum battles right now, skipping only the double battles, which I don't like to do in solo challenges. By the way, if you deposit all of your HM users and talk to these trainers, they will still not battle you. You need to have 2 Pokemon. The only other trainer that I'm intentionally skipping is this guy right here, because he has an Aaron, which is a Steel Rock type. I don't want to fight that right now with Sludge and Bullet Seed. So with as much training as possible, let's fight the rival. Lombre is first. Sludge, one-shots. Simple. Now, this is where I make a critical mistake. He sends in Marshtomp and I'm like, well, I have to use Sludge. No, I don't. I can use Bullet Seed. It does 4 times damage. The effective power for every hit is 40. I was really silly here and it took me a while to figure this out. Luckily, I did realize my mistake. I went for Bullet Seed and that completely obliterates the Marshtomp. After that, I one-shot the Slugma and then head towards Mauville City. On my way, I'm going to continue fighting all the available trainers. I level up to 28 and I have the chance to learn Toxic. I don't think this move is going to be helpful. Also, I could potentially evolve now into a Swalot, but this is a Gulpin only challenge, so I'm going to be canceling that evolution and proceeding with the run. Triathlete Alyssa has a Magnemite. It sucks knocking this thing out with Bullet Seed, which has an effective power of 5. Luckily, its PP is huge, so I'm not going to run out. It just takes a little bit of time, but eventually I finish off the Steel type. Once arriving in Mauville City, I pick up the HM for Rock Smash. Normally this is just to navigate the map, but today is one of those unfortunate scenarios where this is going to give me super effective damage against Watson's Magneton. And as we saw against the previous Magnemite, attacking that line with a grass type move isn't a good idea. So I teach Rock Smash in the place of Bullet Seed, giving me an extremely strange set for a poison type. Sludge, Rock Smash, Encore, and Amnesia. By the way, the strange combination of moves that Gulpin knows is just going to continue throughout this entire playthrough. There were many moments when I would just look down and be like, what? This Pokemon's so weird. Why do I have these moves? Next is Aroma Lady Rose. That's a perfect name for her, by the way. I've never noticed that before. She has 2 Roselia. The reason I'm pointing out this fight is because I want to knock out as many Roselia as possible on trainer teams. They give boosted experience, but they also give special attack EVs, which are what I'm targeting for Gulpin. Another way to get them is on Cycling Road, where I can battle a bunch of Magnemite. There's also one Roselia in the Wind Straits teams, so I fight them as well. So up until now, I am almost on maximum battles, and Gulpin is only level 34. It's at this level that I have a chance to learn Stockpile, Spit Up, and Swallow. I do want to mention here that Stockpile is not very good in Generation 3. It does not increase your defensive stats on the turn you use it. So I'm going to be saying no to all 3 of these moves, even though they're very flavorful to use on Gulpin. With all of the trainers defeated in the surrounding regions, I now need to face the fact I can't delay Watson any longer. Voltorb is first, it's faster than Gulpin by 3 speed. It goes for Shockwave, which doesn't deal much damage even though my special defense is lowered. Sludge one-shots and I move on to Electrike. Here I decided to set up with Amnesia. The reason I'm doing it here rather than on the Voltorb is just because that Pokemon has Spark, whereas Electrike has no way to paralyze me unless I activate Static. And I'm not going to do that because Sludge doesn't make contact. After getting set up to +6, I knock it out and move on to the Magneton. This is where things get difficult. My hope is that Rock Smash is going to lower defense over and over again, and I'm going to be able to knock it out quickly. Now, I play things very poorly here. It goes for Thunder Wave right away, and I thought that I could use Encore on the next turn, but this doesn't work because it moves first after I'm paralyzed, and then uses Sonic Boom, so I just egg it on, and of course it knocks out Gulpin. I have to try again, and things do not go well this time. Voltorb self-destructs, and then I take a lot of damage on the Electrike, arriving at the Magneton with orange health. This time, I'm successfully able to trap it with Encore using Thunder Wave, but this isn't something that's going to last, because as soon as Encore ends, it's going to start using Sonic Boom or Supersonic, 2 moves I don't want to force it to continue using. Even though this situation's pretty good, Gulpin took too much damage early into the battle, and I'm not getting defense drops. Because of that, I lose again. I won't need to level up more here, even if this fight causes 10 more resets. I think the correct choice is just fighting this one out. Eventually, defense drops from Rock Smash will give me the path to victory against the Magneton. In my 3rd attempt against Watson, I finally knock out his toughest Pokemon. Moving on to his ace, Manectric. It is doing almost nothing when it chooses Shockwave, and Quick Attack isn't much better. I inflict poison with Sludge, and his ace goes down. So Watson's defeated, I've earned myself the 3rd badge and a 10% boost to my speed stat. North of Mauville City, I grab the Secret Power TM. It would be nice to teach this, but I think I need to preserve my current moves. Amnesia and Encore together can be very helpful against Flannery. I can't unlearn Rock Smash until I reach Lily Cove City, so the only move I could potentially delete is Sludge, but of course I want to keep it around. Let's talk about a highly requested versus video on this channel. People really want me to play Zangoose and Seviper. These two are a weird pairing because one of them has the erratic growth rate and one of them has the fluctuating growth rate. When you look at both of them on Collector Hector's team, you can see that Zangoose has Swords Dance and Seviper does not have good moves. After all, it's a poison type, so it makes sense that it has trash. You would think that the developers would balance Zangoose by giving it a fluctuating growth rate so that it takes a really long time to reach the maximum possible level, and maybe they would benefit Seviper by giving it the erratic growth rate so it takes the least possible experience to make it to the maximum possible level. But no, the developers reversed these interactions, so Zangoose has the better growth rate, the erratic growth rate. This does mean it levels up very slowly at the beginning of the game, but after that it just kind of steamrolls, as we saw in Pokemon Crystal last year when I backported it. It's going to be interesting comparing just how far apart these two Pokemon are when I eventually get to that match. Also, Collector Hector, it's a rhyme. That's really witty. There's also a black belt over here, and his name is Nob, the translator of the games. I never realized how many cute Easter eggs there are over on this route. On Mount Chimney when I'm fighting Tabitha, I realized that I'm about to level up to 39, so I backtrack down the mountain and fight some Numel, which gives special attack EVs. I want to get to 39 as soon as I can because then I can upgrade Sludge to Sludge Bomb, which is a massive increase in base power, and I think I'm going to need it because I have to face some ground types which resist poison type damage. Also, Maxie starts the battle with Intimidate, so I have a lower attack stat. Luckily, I'm still able to knock out the Mightyena in 2 hits. Next is Camerupt. Sludge Bomb is doing very little damage, but Magnitude only rolls 4, and then he starts using Ember, which is not a great choice. I poison the Camerupt, and I am able to knock it out after he uses a Super Potion. This wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. In Lavaridge Town, I pick up the Charcoal. This is an item I don't expect will be useful. Sometimes you can sell it for extra coins at the game corner. I could buy an additional Ice Beam TM there if I really wanted to, but it has potential to also be used in combination with Hidden Power Fire and maybe Sunny Day for increased damage against Steven Stone's team. We'll have to see if this becomes relevant later into the run. For now, let's focus on Flannery. Nummel's first, and this is the perfect Pokemon for me to demonstrate to you why Amnesia and Encore are perfect for this battle. First turn, Amnesia, setting up my special defense in case Nummel attacks with Overheat. But it goes for Sunny Day, and then I can trap it in this move with Encore. After doing that, I can set up my remaining Amnesias for free. Even though it resists my attacks with Sludge Bomb, I knock it out without it doing a single hit point in damage. Slugma's a one hit, and I move on to the Camerupt. With maximum Amnesia, I'm not scared of it, and it is going to try and set up Sunny Day, so once again I can just trap it with Encore and knock it out with Sludge Bomb over time. Torkoal's last, it has massive physical defense, but Sludge Bomb is neutral, so it's still doing decent damage, and I'm going to knock it out over 3 turns. After attacking once with Overheat, her ace goes for Sunny Day, I trap it with Encore, and then knock it out with Sludge Bomb, sustaining only a small amount of damage throughout this entire fight. It was really easy. I'm glad I prepared well for her. Now, speaking of preparation, there's one thing I want to do before facing Norman, and that's teach Shockwave. I wanted to have access to a special move, and I didn't think that Encore or Amnesia would be particularly useful from here on out. I keep Encore and I delete Amnesia, since Norman is mostly a physical attacker. This battle ended up surprising me. The Spinda, the Vigoroth, and the Linoon are all not very good, but they are surviving single hits from Gulpin. I think this is because my nature is raising my special attack. If it was raising my physical attack, I would have got more knockouts here, like specifically against the Spinda. The Vigoroth would have survived anyways, allowing it 1 turn for Slash, and with my HP low, then the Linoon goes for the kill, trying to knock me out instead of setting up with Belly Drum. I have 5 hit points left over by the time the Slacking comes out. My plan here was to use Shockwave on turn 1 because it usually goes for counter. I can completely negate that move and then attack with Sludge Bomb or Rock Smash on the other turns. That doesn't work when my health is low though, it just goes for Feint Attack and that's it for Gulpin. I tried the fight again, but it ends identically. Then in my 3rd attempt, I make it to the Slacking and I am able to have some play here attacking with Sludge Bomb. Unfortunately, the Slacking can both heal with a Citrus Berry as well as Norman's Hyper Potions. Gulpin's just not able to last long enough, so I needed an alternative strategy here. I make the long trip back to Mauville City so that I can talk to this round man because he can teach you rollout. I put it in the place of Encore and then I head back to face Norman again. This is not the most consistent strategy to be using, but it will give me enough damage to one-shot the Slacking, at least theoretically. In the first battle I get confused by the Spinda, which ends in an early loss. Second time around I make it further into the battle. However, then the Linoon uses Belly Drum, I miss my rollout, and that's another loss. One of the problems here is that 3 of Norman's Pokemon outspeed Gulpin currently. I have 62 speed and his maximum speed stat is 69, so I'm pretty close to moving first against his team members, although with the fluctuating growth rate it feels quite far away. And speaking of things that are far away, all of the training is on the other side of the map. There are no trainers in this section of the map that I can fight for decent experience yields unless I have access to Surf, and I only get that after I beat Norman. I backtracked to Slateport City all the long way around because the boat is in Slateport City and I can't use that to quickly get to Dewford Town. This was my destination because I want to check the market out. Here I can buy vitamins. They're very expensive, but I can increase both my attack and my special attack stats, so I might as well do that now. After that I visited the Pokemon Center, deposited all of my HM users, and then headed back to the gym, blacking out against Norman over and over and over again, just hoping that luck will eventually align. Finally, I get the fight that I was looking for, and I am not ending up using Rollout here. I have decent health for the Slacking, so I go for Shockwave turn 1, then Rock Smash on every turn that is loafing around. I lower its defense on turn 2 with Rock Smash, which is great. After that, it's taking more damage, and I'm able to finally knock it out. So Norman was pretty brutal, but with him out of the way, I now have Surf, and I can head back to Dewford Town and into the Poke Fan Club to talk to this guy and get the TM for Sludge Bomb. This will be useful if I need to reteach this move later into the playthrough. I continue surfing towards Slateport City because here I can go into the abandoned ship and pick up the TM for Ice Beam. This is a fantastic moveset upgrade that I can teach to Gulpin right now. However, I'm not sure if that's in its best interest. If I give up Sludge Bomb, Rollout, or Shockwave, I might regret it later on. I currently can't delete Rock Smash because I have to get to the move deleter who resides in Lily Cove City. For now, Rollout and Shockwave are going to be my answers for all flying type Pokemon, but without Without Bullet Seed, which I gave up quite a while ago, I no longer have a good option for the rival's Marsh Tomp. My Gulpin is extremely overleveled by this point in the playthrough. It's level 50 and his Marsh Tomp is level 31, so I'm hoping that that's just going to carry me throughout this fight. Sludge Bomb does almost half. It just barely survives the next hit, and luckily Mudshot isn't doing that much to me. Like, it's doing more than you would expect when there is a 19 level discrepancy, but I'm still able to survive, knock it out, and then finish off the Slugma. With him out of the way, I need to head into Winona's gym to face the flying type specialist. Prior to this battle, I did decide to teach Ice Beam, and I'm going to talk about this choice later on in my next playthrough, because in order to have this move, I decided to give up Rollout to keep Shockwave as well for later when bypassing accuracy checks is going to be important. I lock in that choice by saving, and now let's face Winona. Swablu, one-shot with Ice Beam of course. Altaria, also a one-shot with Ice Beam. Gulpin is much faster than her ace. She sends in Skarmory next to have Shockwave for this Pokemon, which is able to two-shot, and Steel Wing does almost nothing. Tropius goes down to a single Ice Beam as you would expect, and Shockwave finishes off the Pelipper after it annoyingly goes for Protect. So Winona ends up being really simple with Ice Beam. Inside Mount Pyre, I fight all of the trainers for as much experience as possible. I need to put in the time now because Tate and Liza are coming up next and they're Psychic type specialists. I expect that Gulpin is really going to suffer against them, but exploring this location also gives me an advantage against their team because I can pick up the TM for Shadow Ball. Do remember though that in Generation 3, this move is dealing physical damage, which against Tate and Liza makes it far superior because they like to use Calm Mind to increase their special defense. Now, I will note, before I reached the top of the tower to pick up the Shadow Ball TM, I did encounter the Wobbuffet trainer by accident. His name is Psychic Cedric, which is a nice witty rhyme. Unfortunately, the Wobbuffet ends up finishing me off because I'm not able to one-shot it, and then counter does massive damage, knocking Gulpin out in a single hit. By the way, I recorded this first Gulpin playthrough back at the beginning of 2025, on January 11th. I'm recording this voiceover right now on April 11th, so 3 months later. Since the time that I did this Gulpin run, I have learned a way to play around Psychic Cedric. If I go to Lily Cove City first and then backtrack to Mount Pyre after getting that fly location, I can also explore the department store and use the move tutor for Substitute. Then I can use Substitute turn 1 against the Wobbuffet, and if it goes for counter, it won't knock me out, instead just breaking my sub. Now, this tactic would have been really helpful if I had known it, however I didn't, and I also didn't save before Psychic Cedric. I thought that I could just skip him since he is a predictable rotating spinner, but I didn't have the skill to do that. Now, in order for me to lose here, I have to send in my HM users. However, I can't do that because I also poisoned the Wobbuffet, so eventually it's going to get knocked out, and this is his only Pokemon, so once it faints, I end up winning with my Zigzagoon, which is against my solo challenge rules, so I have to reset. And this is extremely painful. I just sat here in the tower for a second, really letting it sink in, because when I push the button, I am taken all the way back before Winona. Luckily, she isn't much of a problem, but I did lose all of the training that I did inside of Mount Pyre. This time though, I'm not going there first. Instead, I'm going to go to Lily Cove City and fight all of the trainers along the way for experience. I use the move deleter, get rid of Rock Smash, gain access to the department store, but I don't teach Substitute. I hadn't thought of that strategy yet. I backtracked to Mount Pyre, and then I did take on Psychic Cedric again. Unfortunately, I lose for a second time. Okay, so we're just gonna quickly navigate around him and skip this battle entirely, but then he catches me. So I end up having to defeat the Wobbuffet. This time it works, and I'm finally able to pick up the Shadow Ball TM. In preparation for Tate and Liza, I teach this move in the empty slot left over by Rock Smash. Unfortunately for me though, this move isn't going to be immediately useful because I have to face Maxie next. His team stacks up quite well against Gulpin. Mightyena hits me with Intimidate right away, lowering my attack. Most of my moves are physical unless I want to be using Ice Beam or Shockwave in this case. But the latter won't work on Camerupt, so my better option is the former. In this case though, Ice Beam is not able to one-shot the Mightyena. Maxie uses a Super Potion, but luckily this doesn't save it. And that's really good because I only have 2 more PP of Ice Beam, and this would have been enough to knock out the Camerupt, but it gets a critical hit with Earthquake Earthquake and one-shots Gulpin. It seemed like I was getting better luck in the next battle because I one-shot the Mighty Yenna with my own critical hit. However, then the Camerupt uses Amnesia, raising its special defense by 2 stages. This doesn't allow me to two-shot when using Ice Beam. It survives and then Maxi heals it. I don't really have good options from here. I guess Shadow Ball in this case is going to be the best pick. It can lower special defense, which might get me back to a place where Ice Beam makes sense to use again. It's also dealing physical damage, and it inflicts more when compared with Sludge Bomb. I do manage to take out the Camerupt, but I only have 18 hit points remaining for the following Crobats, so it gets me because of course it's faster than Gulpin. The same scenario plays out in the next battle where Crobat gets me because I'm on low health after the Camerupt. So what do I need in order to win this fight? Well, I tried one more time. This is my 4th battle against Maxi, and it still ends in a loss. So I decided to use an escape rope and leave the Magma hideout to try and adjust my strategy. I didn't want to give up any of my current moves, so the only leverage I have is leveling up, going to 58 over the next damage rounding threshold, and then coming back to see if this will help against Maxi. And just to try to make this video as concise as possible, no, this is not going to be the answer. I lose 2 more times. I just take too much damage from the Camerupt. Although I do end up winning here, but it is by pure dumb luck. I end up freezing the Mighty Yenna, which is perfect. Then it can't go for Scary Face and drop my speed, which means Camerupt isn't going to be faster than Gulpin. And making this situation even better for Gulpin, he switches the Mighty Yenna out, sending in Camerupt next. Because he's used his super potion, he can't heal it, so even though it'll take 3 turns for me to knock out with 1 Ice Beam and 2 Shadow Balls, this is fine. Even if it attacked once with Earthquake, I would have survived and had decent health left over for the Crobat, but it just chooses Amnesia twice and I knock it out. So this is the best case scenario. Mighty Yenna is still frozen, I finish it off, move on to the Crobat with full health, and finally defeat Maxi. Although for my second run, I don't think that result is going to be replicable. I am going to need a very different strategy. In Lily Cove City, I grab Rest and then I stomp Matt inside of the Team Aqua hideout. The next section of the game is just a bunch of uneventful training. Gulpin starts this at level 58, and by the end it is only level 62. I really don't want to do additional training with the fluctuating growth rate. Leveling Gulpin up is just taking so long. So let's see how it does against Tate and Liza at level 62. Their first 2 Pokemon are Xatu and Claydol. Both of these are scary for Gulpin. Xatu has Psychic and Claydol has Earthquake. I was expecting it to go for Earthquake, but it's not able to because Ice Beam, while it doesn't one-hit, it freezes the Claydol, which is perfect. They have Hyper Potions, they don't have full restores, so they can't get rid of this status condition unless they get the lucky 10% chance to defrost. That means I can focus my attention on knocking out the Xatu and whatever follows it. I thought that this was undoubtedly going to give me a win. I one-shot the Xatu with Ice Beam. Lunatone comes in next, but Shadow Ball can't one-hit. It goes for Calm Mind, eats its Citrus Berry, but this doesn't save it from the follow-up Shadow Ball. It's actually convenient that it had the Citrus Berry because they weren't able to heal with a Hyper Potion, wasting time. Soul Rock comes in next. I do a similar amount of damage to it using Shadow Ball, and then after it attacks with Psychic, Claydol defrosts, which is really bad. I think I made a mistake here, targeting it instead of the Soul Rock, which would have got the knockout, and then I only would have sustained damage from Earthquake. But in this case, I get hit by Earthquake as well as Psychic, and Gulpin faints. If I lost that after I froze, even if it was player error, I think I'm gonna need more levels. So I go and do a bunch of additional training, leveling Gulpin up to 65 before coming back. I'm over damage rounding threshold now, and I've given Gulpin the Never Melt Ice. This allows me to one-shot the Claydol using Ice Beam. Xatu targets Zigzagoon down with Psychic. By the way, you can't start this battle if you don't have a partner Pokemon, so that's why I have a random HM user here. Next, they send out Lunatone. I think I make another mistake now. I should have targeted it down because it does have Hypnosis, which can be very scary. Instead though, I one-shot the Xatu. Leaving it around a little bit longer is generally safer because it likes to set up with Calm Mind or use Sunny Day. Also, in general, I would rather be hit by Confuse Ray when compared with Hypnosis. But still, I've made it to their final 2 Pokemon. Lunatone is buffing its special defense. Shadow Ball is able to two-shot. It doesn't attack once. The Soul Rock is able to attack not once but twice, twice. However, Gulpin has enough health to shrug these off, because Soul Rock is less specially offensive. It is a physical attacker instead. As a result, I'm able to pull through with a win in my second battle against Tate and Liza. This honestly wasn't as bad as I was expecting. The multi-battle in the Space Center is really not that difficult for Gulpin. I probably should have Substitute by this point so that I'm not getting constantly intimidated by the Mighty Hyenas, or at risk of Confuse Ray from, say, Maxie's Crobat. Still though, a win is a win. Archie continues the trend. He's a really simple battle in Pokemon Emerald, and with him out of the way, Rayquaza comes in, saves the day, and then, inside of Juan's gym, I don't go right for him. Instead, I battle all of the trainers on the lower floor, which is something I almost never do. But I need as much experience as I can get. I think that Gulpin might have to beat Steven Stone using Double Team, because its move pool is just not that good against him, especially with base 43 special attack. With all of these people finished off, my Gulpin is level 67, and this is going to be more than enough for Juan, because he is really bad. Love Disc is first, one shot with Shockwave. Whiscash is next. Now, I would like to have Giga Drain for this battle, which is a TM that I've picked up. However, I don't want to teach it right now because I'm saving it for Wallace at the end of the game. Ice Beam could have two-shot if the Whiscash didn't go for Amnesia, but I can just finish it using Sludge Bomb. This takes a little bit longer, but it's really just an annoyance. Kingdra's next. Sludge Bomb is able to two-hit, even though it's going for Double Team, and from there, both the Celio and the Crawdaunt are really not that scary. I two-shot both of them using my Electric type move. Now, hilariously, Wally actually has a Pokemon that Gulpin's a little bit scared of. That is Magneton. I don't have any moves that are good against a Steel type right now. I end up taking one reset here before eventually just muscling my way past it. This involved another freeze. I am relying on this status condition way too much. Or maybe that's just how you're supposed to play Gulpin. Inside of Victory Road, I fight the trainers. I want to gain as much experience as possible. All of this grinding, which is fairly efficient because these trainers give good experience yields, only brings Gulpin up to level 69 before I'm ready for the league. I have 31 levels left to gain, but I have kept all of my rare candies up until now, and in Pokemon Emerald there are 15 available that are easy to get, and then one available in the post game, which is in the Safari Zone. So I technically only need to level 15 more times in order to max out, and then gain access to Double Team. Although, I would like to beat the game without that cheesy move if I can avoid it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see how the Elite Four goes at level 69. Sydney is first. I get hit by Sand Attack on turn 1 from the Mighty Hyena after Intimidate. This is already not going well. Luckily, I have Ice Beam, which is special and super effective against both the Shiftry and the Cacturn. Then Crawdaunt comes in. I have Shockwave for this battle because if my accuracy's been lowered, I can bypass the checks and hit for super effective damage here. Unfortunately, its base power is just a little bit too low, so I'm not able to one-shot. I bleed out all of Sydney's full restores here before moving on to his Absol, which I guess is nice. It sets up Swords Dance, and I just barely am not able to two-shot using Sludge Bomb due to Intimidate. Still though, Absol isn't able to do enough damage, so I beat the first league member. Phoebe is next. I don't have Substitute here, and that's a big problem. The Dusclops is awful because it can use Confuse Ray, or it could also use Curse. In this case, it doesn't though, which is pretty lucky for me, so I move on with the rest of the battle. But Gulpin isn't able to one-shot her Pokemon using Shadow Ball, and because of that, it's taking tons of damage from the final Dusclops, which has Earthquake. I decided to black out here to keep experience. I'm going to repeat this over and over again. Blacking out against the league. I don't want to waste your time going through the specifics of all of these battles. In general, Sydney is a little bit luck-based, but not really that bad, and then I usually lose to Phoebe. At level 72, it looks like I have a damage roll to one-shot the Bayonets on Phoebe's team, at least in some scenarios. This gives me the edge I need for Gulpin to defeat her for the first time and move on to Glacia. Unfortunately, bad news again, because Glacia is brutal. While Shockwave is super effective against her water types, it doesn't do as much damage when compared with Sludge Bomb, even though my special attack is slightly higher. There is one exception to this though. Shockwave will actually do slightly more damage against the Wall Rain. I checked these damage ranges in post, so that's how I know that now. While I was doing the playthrough, I was just assuming that Sludge Bomb would be better against all of her Pokemon though. I ended up taking one reset here because I wanted to try her again, but after the second defeat, I just decided to continue blacking out and fighting the League over and over again. As I head into the Sydney battle, look at the clock. 3 hours, 15 minutes. Okay, after a bunch of training, it takes me nearly 15 minutes to make it back to Glacia, and then this time around at level 78, the damage ranges were looking pretty good. So I decided to save here and take a bunch of resets and try and muscle my way through her. Because Drake is the trainer after her, and I have his team solved with Ice Beam. But I do need to find a way to beat Glacia first. I tried out Hidden Power Fire in the place of Shadow Ball because the Ghost type move isn't really that useful after Phoebe. This didn't end up working because I just don't have enough health to survive all of her Pokemon. By the time I make it to the Wall Rain, I'm usually low-ish on health and it's doing just enough damage. Plus, Gulpin at level 78 can't 2-hit. It is so close, by the way. So I take my 44th Fault, and then I figured out there might be another option because I can heal during this fight. If I teach Giga Drain in the place of Shadow Ball, then I can use this against the Celio and the Wall Rain to gain back small amounts of health and hopefully muscle my way through. And while this doesn't work the first time that I implemented it, the second time around, it does give me the health I need to knock out her final Pokemon. Okay, Drake, as I predicted, he is completely trivial. Ice Beam does 4 times damage against 3 of his Pokemon. It's super effective against the Shelgon, and I can just use Sludge Bomb for the Kingdra. So Gulpin at level 79 has cleared Drake and is ready to take on Wallace, the second last trainer in Pokemon Emerald. Wailord is first. I go for Shockwave, get a lucky critical hit, and one-shot Wallace's first Pokemon. Then he sends in Gyarados. It triggers Intimidate, lowering my attack, but I was going to use Shockwave anyway. But the special move, which does 4 times damage, does not knock out the Gyarados in a single hit. Alright, that's really bad. It can set up with Dragon Dance, and then use Earthquake for super effective damage. But following the Gyarados, Whiscash comes in, and I can use Giga Drain here to heal back most of my health. Tentacruel follows. It takes 3 hits from Shockwave because it has massive special defense, doing damage with Hydro Pump on the way. I have half health remaining for the Ludicolo, but luckily for me I have super effective damage with Sludge Bomb. I one-shot and move on to the Milotic. Now, here is where things get a little bit tricky. I'm running the Shell Bell to heal as much health as possible. I can use Giga Drain for good damage, but I run out of PP and then have to resort to using Shockwave, which is doing unfortunately not enough damage. The Milotic is able to stall me using Recover over and over again. This is frustrating. I end up taking a reset here and trying again, but things just aren't working very well at the current level. So I think it's time to use Rare Candies. I have a total of 15, which brings Gulpin all the way up to level 94. This makes Wallace so much easier. Shockwave is able to 2-hit the Wailord even if it doesn't get a critical hit, but after he uses a full restore, I do get a critical hit, knocking it out in 1 turn, saving a little bit of time. Now I can one-shot the Gyarados using Shockwave. Whiscash is a 1-hit with Giga Drain. Tentacruel takes only 2 hits from Shockwave, which is more convenient. Ludicolo goes down to Sludge Bomb. It always feels nice when I one-shot this Pokemon. Usually it's just such an annoyance, setting up Double Team and Leech Seed and using Giga Drain. I don't want to think about that. Anyway, I move on to the Milotic. This ends up being a little bit easier for a couple reasons. I get a lucky poison with Sludge Bomb, then I critical hit, knocking it out so it isn't able to stall me as long using Recover. And with that, Wallace is defeated. Okay, so there's only 1 battle left, but I do think this is going to be the most difficult battle that Gulpin has had to do in Emerald up until this point. To prepare for him, I go to the Safari Zone and I pick up the 1 last Rare Candy. I'm also going to do some training in the Overworld to level up over 94 to 95. But the real question is, what moveset is going to be good against his Steel types? Sludge Bomb is effectively useless, Shockwave is not great because he does have ground types, and its base power has also really fallen off by this point in the run. Giga Drain can be useful to gain back some health, but there are usually better ways to do that. The Leftovers, or Rest, or some other tactics, which I'm going to talk about in 1 second. For my first attempt against him, I just decided on a very generic set. Hidden Power Fire, Shockwave, Ice Beam, and Giga Drain. All moves that do good damage to some of his Pokemon. I'm essentially just wanting to scout out my damage ranges here. I don't think I can win with this strategy right away. So I hope you're ready for it. Here is how Steven Stone went. Skarmory is first. Of course, Hidden Power Fire is my best option, and Gulpin is able to two-shot, which is pretty good. Next is Claydol. I'm going to be two-shotting this with Ice Beam, and it uses Earthquake, inflicting massive damage. I finish it, and then Aggron comes out. I don't have good moves against this thing. Hidden Power Fire is my best choice, and it's only neutral. I decided to go for Giga Drain here to try to gain back some health, but this ends up not working. The Grass-type move is doing roughly 1/3 to the Aggron, and every time it hits with Earthquake, it does about half to Gulpin. To make the Aggron a little bit easier, I could potentially use Water Pulse. And this is going to be able to two-shot, but then I have another problem, because once it goes down, I have to face the Metagross, and my Hidden Power Fire is not able to do half to it, which is unfortunate. And it's going to finish Gulpin with either Psychic or Earthquake. So I need more health for the Metagross to hopefully survive one Earthquake or Psychic. But as you can see, since the Claydol and the Aggron are the two Pokemon that precede the Metagross, and both of them have Earthquake, which deals a lot of damage, there isn't really a good place for me to heal prior to the Metagross. So rest isn't an option to solve this puzzle. By the way, it had been almost 4 hours of time while I was playing, so the next time I tried to fight Steven, I used my rare candy to go up to level 96, but I accidentally gave it to Talo. I hate when this happens. Anyways, I did one battle at the lower level with a different set, Substitute, Attract, Hidden Power, and Giga Drain. This ends up doing better than I was expecting because I can use Attract against the Aggron and then hopefully stall it out, setting up Substitute and healing with Giga Drain as well as the leftovers. The downsides of using Attract in this fight is while it is effective against Skarmory, Aggron, Cradily, and Armaldo, it cannot affect Claydol or Metagross because they're genderless. Also, if I get unlucky and Aggron is using too many Earthquakes, then I'm just gonna lose, because I'm trying to set up Substitute to block its damage and then hope that Attract will make it fail to attack. If I can knock it out with my Substitute intact, maybe I have a chance against the Metagross. I failed once with this strategy, and then I decided that Ice Beam is probably the better move in combination with Hidden Power Fire. It just has a little bit more utility, allowing me to knock out the Claydol faster, plus it has more PP, which is definitely an advantage because I used my PP max on it earlier in the playthrough. It's also going to be super effective against the Cradily, which is an advantage because it's quite defensive and it can get really annoying with Ingrain, Confuse Ray, and Giga Drain. Also, it will get occasional Omni boosts with Ancient Power, and that'll just make it a really uphill battle if I don't have good damage. I think the upside for Ice Beam to freeze is also a benefit of running it over Giga Drain. Unfortunately, this battle ends in a loss because I get unlucky with Attract on the Aggron again, but in the next battle, I finally move on to the Metagross to get to test out this strategy. Substitute tanks the first hit from Psychic, and then I realize something bad. Hidden Power Fire is not going to do enough damage to the Metagross that even after it consumes its Citrus Berry, Steven Stone is still going to use a full restore. Because of this damage range, I'm not able to two-hit, so it gets healed to full, then I take it back down to red health, and without my Substitute, it just knocks Gulpin out. Because remember, Attract is ineffective here. I tried one more time, but the fight ended in the exact same way, and this basically crushed my hopes for Gulpin getting a time under 4 hours in the first playthrough. I decided to go back to the league, fight them over and over again, and level up more. I think I'm gonna need to go to level 100 and get access to Double Team. But while I was doing this, during my second league attempt, I realized that there's gonna be another way to fight Steven Stone. What I can do is use Ice Beam on turn 1 against Metagross. This is not so that I do chip damage, because after my next Hidden Power, it will still heal with the Citrus Berry and then survive my next hit. He'll use a full restore after that, and I'll just lose. The reason I'm using Ice Beam on turn 1 against the Metagross is because I want to freeze it. If I do, this status condition might give me the win. I can chip away with Ice Beam a little bit more and then use Hidden Power to knock it out, bypassing the full restore. Or I can get my Substitute back and heal my health. If I do that, then I can survive 1 Earthquake and Psychic and 3-shot the Metagross. By the way, Steven Stone very rarely likes to use repeated full restores on the same Pokemon during the battle. He instead prefers using 1 on each of his Pokemon. He has 4 of the healing items, by the way. It took me a little bit of time to make it to the Metagross and successfully land the freeze, but eventually I do. I chip away at it with Ice Beam, Metagross defrosts, but it looks like I can knock it out with Hidden Power now. I go for the Fire type move and it gets the job done. With Metagross down, now there's only 2 Pokemon left, Cradily and Armaldo. Against Cradily, I can take my time setting up Substitute and then knock it out with Ice Beam. Also, I'm going to be using Attract on the following Armaldo just to make things as consistent as possible. Ice Beam is able to 3-shot, but Steven wants to save the Armaldo, his last Pokemon, so he uses full restores here here, healing it a bunch. This is one reason having more PP is very helpful. In the end, Gulpin is able to outlast. It finishes off the Armaldo and clocks in with a first playthrough time of 4 hours, 21 minutes, and 49 seconds, with 41 resets and 21 blackouts. It finished the game at level 98, not having to use double team, and it got a game time of 13 hours and 58 minutes. Okay, it's a bad result, but I didn't have to use double team, so I'm a little bit encouraged by that. But I also really didn't want to play Gulpin again, so I procrastinated a lot on this one. It took me just under 3 months to summon the confidence and come back. And to help me out for this optimization section of the game, I looped in Ike the Killer, who is a fantastic player in solo runs of Pokemon Emerald. I consulted with him to get a sense for what my strategy for the follow-up run should be. We needed to solve problems like Watson, Norman, figure out Tate and Liza, and I was really hoping that he was going to provide some insight that would allow me to not have to use freeze strategies against Steven Stone. He did provide an alternative, and it is absolutely wild. It's a really cool strategy, so let me talk about it. First of all, for Roxanne, just use Bullet Seed. Then I do optional training so that I have Sludge and a decent level. I think 18 to 20 is best for Brawly, just because he can cause some problems chipping away at you slowly. Plus, Nosepass is going to need the levels later. Wait. Editor Scott here. Normally, I would cut a clip like that out where I accidentally said Nosepass instead of Gulpin, but I find that so hilarious that I am associating this run with the terrible playthrough I did with Nosepass, so I'm just gonna leave it, and this little audio note will act as explanation. Okay, now back to the run. I could have trained more in the early game to have a higher level for Watson, but Ike the Killer suggested to me that we should just try to luck through this battle because preparing for him won't make it significantly better. His strategy was to use Rollout to knock out the Magneton. Turn 1, we're going to knock out the Voltorb. At first this doesn't work because my Gulpin's level is too low. By the way, notice here that I've gone for an attack boosting nature. This is because Gulpin is mostly using physical attacks throughout the mid section of the game with the new route. And we compared damage ranges and it didn't seem to make things awful against Steven Stone. Eventually though, I'll one-shot the Voltorb on Watson's team. Then I set up with Amnesia against the Electrike so that both the Manectric and the Magneton won't be using Shockwave. From here, Gulpin gets rolling with Rollout, and hopefully it will do enough damage to 2-shot or 3-shot the Magneton. As I see it, there are 2 significant flaws to using this strategy. Number 1, Rollout can trigger static against the Electrike, and being paralyzed makes Rollout so much less effective. Number 2, if I'm blacking out over and over again to Watson to gain levels, then I'm unable to continuously equip a Cherry Berry, which would make the odds of this battle slightly easier. You'll notice here I'm holding an Everstone. This is just to escape the animations that happen every time Gulpin levels up. I ended up pausing and going for a little drive to do some errands while doing this Gulpin playthrough because I got so frustrated just not lucking through Watson over and over again. I figured this battle might be possible around 42 speed where I can move naturally first against the Magneton, but instead I make it all the way up to 53 speed, which is almost enough to move first against the Manectric, which has 55. Then I get the lucky run I needed against Watson and I finish off his final Pokemon. This was not fun and it took a total of 26 blackouts just to clear the 3rd gym leader. Luckily for me, things get much easier from here. I do want to reflect on one thing though, which is I could have used Yawn against Watson to make things slightly easier. Putting the Magneton to sleep does have its advantages. However, in the end, you're still just going to be relying on Rollout dealing good damage, and with Paralysis, that ends up just being luck. So this strategy has prevented me from teaching Rock Smash to my Gulpin, which does give my moveset a little bit more flexibility throughout the next section of the game. When I arrive in Fall Arbor Town, I'm going to use 1 Heart Scale to immediately give Yawn back to Gulpin. This move will be very helpful against Norman. Maxie at the top of Mount Pyre is a bit problematic, but he's easier this time around because I have access to Rollout, which is very good. You can set this up on the Mightyena at the beginning of the battle and then deal okay damage to the Camerupt, and the Zubat at the end is not really an issue. Still, I do have some resets here. Flannery, who's next, is pretty simple. Knock out the Numel, set up Amnesia on the Slugma, and then get rolling, sweeping the rest of her team. Norman can cause resets, and he does in this playthrough, but when I'm using Yawn on the Slacking, it just becomes very ineffective. The downside here is that it wakes up on the turn that you're attacking it with a semi-powerful Rollout, and then it goes for counter, knocking out Gulpin. But overall, this strategy is pretty solid against him. As I move into the mid-game, we need to talk about the fluctuating growth rate. It's very complicated because it uses different formulas depending on the level your Pokemon is at. What I want to draw your attention to is this table. On On the left-hand side, it shows the total amount of experience required to reach each level. And on the right-hand side, it shows you how much experience is needed at each level to get to the next level. If you look through the fluctuating column, you can see that alternating between levels, one has a high amount of experience and then one has a low amount of experience. So at every even level, it takes significantly less to level up than it does on all of the odd levels. So I can synergize my rare candy usage around this knowledge. Every time I'm at an odd level, once I'm decently leveled, around like 60 or so, then I can start using rare candies. My target level for the end of this playthrough is level 90. So if I want to alternate rare candy and training, and I have a total of 15 rare candies until I beat Wallace, then I can start using rare candies once I reach level 60. This dramatically speeds up the mid-game. I think the key piece of insight that Ike the Killer gave me was don't teach Ice Beam prior to facing Winona. It seems like this move makes so much sense, but Gulpin does so much better if it just makes it through her using Sludge Bomb and then Hidden Power for the Skarmory. After defeating her, I can then go to Lily Cove City and teach Substitute, which ends up being my solution for Maxie inside the volcano. After setting up, the strategy just gets very simple. Pray that Rollout is going to do what it needs to do to finish off the rest of his Pokemon. Often this doesn't work and I took a lot of resets here, but I do think the fastest approach is just lucking through this fight. My target level for Tate and Liza is 68. This ensures that Shadow Ball has an 88% chance to knock out the Lunatone in a single hit when I'm running an attack boosted nature. I also am able to one-shot the Claydol now, and that's a guarantee, so it's never able to use Earthquake against me. Turn 1, I knock out Claydol, then I take care of Lunatone in a single hit, avoiding Hypnosis. After that, I'm going to knock out the Xatu so that it doesn't go for Psychic. After all, I can survive one more from Soul Rock, which at this current level with Shadow Ball is still a one-hit. Okay, let's talk about the late game. Sludge Bomb gives me a decent answer to all of Sydney's Pokemon to get fast training from him. Shadow Ball and Substitute make Phoebe so much easier than she was last time around, making the training against her also consistent. And then I can knock out a lot of Glacia's Pokemon even at low levels if I've kept Rollout until this point in the run. Setting up with Substitute on turn 1 does give me a better chance of sweeping her entire team, but at low levels she can still give Gulpin losses. In the end though, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna black out here over and over again, training on all even levels. Whenever I hit an odd level and my experience is low, I'm gonna use a rare candy. If my experience is decently high after the battle during an odd level, I will push through this to the next odd level before I use another rare candy. This process is slow, but it is much faster than it was last time around. My target level for this training is level 89. Then I teach Ice Beam in the place of Rollout and I crush Drake with it. Now it's time to do more moveset switch-ups before Wallace. Giga Drain in the place of Ice Beam and Rest in the place of Shadow Ball. I also need to hold a Lepa Berry for this fight. That is to counter out the Milotic's use of Recover in case I get stalled out, although it's not that likely at a high level like 89. One key to success here is setting up Substitute right away on the Wailord and ensuring that I don't get hit by the Gyarados' Intimidate. Then Sludge Bomb can two-shot it, and I move on to the Whiscash, which I easily heal against using Giga Drain. From there, using Rest and Substitute, I stall the Tentacruel out until it runs out of Hydro Pump PP. Then it does so much less damage using Sludge Bomb or Ice Beam. My own Sludge Bomb one-shots the following Ludicolo, I move on to the Milotic, and it's quite easy to finish. So I've beaten Wallace at the exact target level that I need to take on Steven Stone. This means I don't need to get the Safari Zone rare candy, but I am going to make a massive moveset change now. The final set that I'm going to be using is Hidden Power Fire, Water Pulse, Yawn, and Protect. This set only works if you're using it in combination with the leftovers. And this is the genius of Ike the Killer's mind. I never would have thought up something like this. By the way, this strategy involves so many tiny details. I am going to go through all of them for you. First of all, the Skarmory. We could have knocked it out in 2 hits if I went for a special attack boosting nature, but going for the attack boosting nature to make everything else faster up until this point in the game, we have sacrificed that range. This is slightly unfortunate because number 1, it takes a lot of time to knock out his first Pokemon, and number 2, it can go for Steel Wing, dealing small amounts of damage. Every hit point that Gulpin has matters during this battle. There are 3 options to knocking the Skarmory out. Number 1, spam Hidden Power Fire over and over again. This has a small amount of upside upside because sometimes Steven Stone's AI views this move as super effective and then he'll switch in one of his other Pokemon. And the two that I saw were Aggron and Metagross. I genuinely don't think he will switch in anything else. If the Aggron comes out, the battle proceeds as normal, but if the Metagross comes in, I have a distinct advantage because I'm going to be attacking into it with hidden power. Now, I don't end up getting a win here, and I'm going to talk about how to fight the Metagross later. For now though, let's just go back to the Skarmory. There's another approach, which is using Water Pulse on turn 1 and then 2 hidden powers to avoid Steven Stone using a full restore on the Skarmory. This saves turns and makes the battle a little bit faster, but it does essentially eliminate the chance that he sends in his Metagross through a switch, which is a little bit worse. But there is upside to Water Pulse confusing the Skarmory, potentially saving you from getting hit by Steel Wing. The third approach is using Hidden Power turn 1, Water Pulse turn 2, and then Hidden Power turn 3. This avoids the full restore, has some upside from confusion, and it also has the upside of Metagross getting switched in. But that's still quite rare. Normally, I just knock out the Skarmory and move on to the Claydol. This is where things get awful. You have to use Yawn turn 1. If Gulpin has taken any damage, the Claydol will go for Earthquake on turn 1. If Gulpin has full health though, and has avoided Skarmory's use of Steel Wing, then the Claydol will either set up with Reflect or Light Screen. It seems more common to use Reflect and less common to use Light Screen, which is good for me, because then after Yawn, I'm going to go for Protect, healing a small amount of health if I've taken any damage, and then I can use Water Pulse to knock out the Claydol. This takes forever if Light Screen is on the field, but it takes 5 turns if it isn't. While resetting this fight over and over again, I found some nuances against the Claydol. If my health has been impacted by it using Earthquake, then I want to trigger a full restore so Steven will heal it to full health. When he does this, I can anticipate the full restore, use Yawn, put it to sleep, and then continue knocking it out, gaining a lot more health back with leftovers. This is essentially how this strategy functions. You want to put Pokemon to sleep, trigger full restores, use Protect, heal a bunch of health with leftovers, and then knock his Pokemon out. I have a bunch of resets to the Claydol in a lot of cases, but if I make it to the Aggron and I have full health, then I'm in a pretty good position to make it to the Metagross. For Aggron, turn 1, Yawn, turn 2, Protect to prevent the second Earthquake, then Water Pulse or Hidden Power. Here, if you go for Hidden Power 3 times, he will heal with a full restore and give you another Yawn, which allows you to Protect, use a bunch of Water Pulses, and knock out Aggron, healing to full health. This is key, because then Metagross is going to go for Psychic or Earthquake, and at the lower level, we need to be able to survive this hit to get off 1 Yawn. We can then Protect, use Hidden Power Fire in combination with 1 Water Pulse to 4-shot the Metagross. It has to stay asleep with Yawn. If all of that happens, then I will make it to the Cradily, and I finally did pull this off after 110 resets. This is the problem with this strategy though. The Cradily has Ingrain, it has Confuse Ray, it can Omni Boost with Ancient Power, and in this case it gets 2. After that, Gulpin is just not doing enough damage on each turn, and I end up fainting here, never making it to the Armaldo. So let's talk about the strengths of this strategy. It allows Gulpin to win even when it's at a fairly low level. For example, Ike the Killer beat the game at level 84. That said, it's extremely inconsistent, and I think it's far better used if you're going into the final fight at a very low level. If I want consistency here, I need to do something else. And I ended up restarting this second playthrough and doing a third run with Gulpin just to run the other strategy. Plus, I had a way of making Watson a little bit easier in this run as well, which will end up benefiting Gulpin's time. So here we go, round 3 with Gulpin. I cannot believe that I'm doing this. The strategy for Watson starts right after I beat Roxanne. I am going to search this grass patch until I find an Abra and catch it. Then I can use this to teleport back to Fort Tree City after going to Lily Cove City prior to facing Winona. This is key because then for Watson I can teach Rock Smash and it won't mess up Gulpin's moveset for Winona where I need to teach Hidden Power Fire if I'm going to forego Ice Beam. Gulpin has really started to push me to my limits in a lot of ways, and I might actually reconsider how I'm handling this Abra HM user. I am starting to reconsider if I should just force this encounter. Last year, when I said that I had made my final decision on it and that I wasn't going to do that, I was playing Pokemon like Swampert and Blaziken, which are amazing in Pokemon Emerald, and they don't really need much help. Abra teleporting them around the map just makes really good Pokemon even better. But in a case like Gulpin, it's gonna make a terrible Pokemon at least manageable. Dare I say, it might actually make this run slightly fun. And when I'm doing it 4 times in a row, I need to do everything in my power to make these as palatable as possible. Anyway, I'm starting to lean towards the fact that I should be giving Pokemon Abra, and of course I would apply that across the board, even to good Pokemon. I'm not going to make a decision in this video, I'll wait to get some feedback from all of you, but in general, I think the way I like playing these solo challenges the best is when the overworld RNG is completely deterministic. Everything within the battle should remain untouched. I don't like changing things except for some small niche scenarios in Generation 2, like with Morty spamming Mean Look in Generation 2 when it's entirely useless because I'm only ever going to use a single Pokemon. So how much does Rock Smash help against Watson? Well, it at least gives me something consistent that I can use against the Magneton, although it isn't everything that I need. Instead, what I'm going to do is hold the Cherry Berry going into this fight. I'm also going to make sure that Gulpin has exactly 42 speed before I start trying attempts. This is just so that I outspeed the Magneton in all scenarios. That allows me to go for Rock Smash turn 1, then Encore on turn 2 to trap it into Thunder Wave. Despite the fact that I get paralyzed, I can then use Rock Smash, hopefully dropping the Magneton's defense and getting an optimistic 4-hit with the fighting type move. This challenge makes me long for Generation 4 Rock Smash when it has 40 base power instead of 20. Now, even though this strategy isn't completely foolproof, it is so much better than just blacking out and trying to use Rollout. I only have a total of 4 faults against Watson before I defeat him. That said, my time is still not very good by this point in the game, so if you're comparing just the raw metric of time, I do think that lucking through with Rollout is the superior strategy, provided you defeat Watson the first time you fight him, getting extremely lucky. However, I think when considering consistency, the Encore Rock Smash strategy is superior. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm not using a move like Mud Slap or Fire Punch to knock out the Magneton, it's simply because those tutors require BP and they're only available in the post game. Immediately after Watson, I teach Rollout in the place of Encore. This allows me to get through Maxi, although inconsistently, and then defeat Flannery with Amnesia on my set, which does help out against her special attackers. Still, there is a possibility that I lose even against her when I'm using Rollout, which is pretty frustrating, although this fight is really not that bad. Once I defeat her, I reteach Yawn in the place of Amnesia so that I have it for Norman. For Winona, I'm going to be using Sludge Bomb and Hidden Power Fire to manage her team members, but I go to Lily Cove City first so I can delete Rock Smash and get access to Substitute. Now, this is where things get a little strange. When I calculated damage ranges prior to the last playthrough, I saw that there wasn't a huge difference between running a special attack boosting nature and a physical attack boosting nature. And I don't know what went wrong, but something did go wrong, because attempting to fight Tate and Liza with Shadow Ball at level 70 is not going to happen. I'm not able to one-shot the Soul Rock, the Claydol, the Lunatone. It's really bad. And grinding in this section of the game is profoundly inefficient. I end up having to level all the way to 76 before I can finally beat them with a Rash Nature. Let's go back to the first playthrough and briefly reflect on the fact that I beat them at level 65. I didn't even pull that off when I had an Adamant Nature. Anyway, we're going to talk about how to make that possible in a second. For now, I forged on and completed this playthrough. The late game is all mostly the same. I'm just optimizing my experience and level to try to get Gulpin to level 94 by the time I've beat Wallace. This takes so much grinding, and I end up starting to fight Steven Stone almost 45 minutes later than I did in the previous playthrough when I targeted level 90 to fight him and used an Adamant Nature. That just shows you how much the nature change impacts the mid-game. However, if I'm not going to beat Steven Stone, then nothing matters. So here's my new strategy. Hidden Power Fire, Ice Beam, Substitute, and Attract. I have reverted back to my initial strategy at roughly the same level. What I figured out is that if you use a Rash Nature and you're using Attract, you can mostly neutralize the Skarmory, the Aggron, the Cradily, and the Armaldo. I have the ability to two-shot both the Skarmory and the Claydol, which speeds up the early portion of the battle and gets me consistently to the Aggron, where I can chance things with Attract and Substitute. Once I have my defense up, then I can play things out against the Metagross. But even if I don't, I could potentially freeze it and then get a free win. By the way, if you're wondering, Hidden Power Fire does not thaw a frozen Pokemon. This effect was added in Generation 4, so right now I can freeze with Ice Beam and then chip away with Hidden Power Fire without the Metagross being defrosted right away. If I make it to the Metagross with my Substitute intact, instead I can just attack 3 times with Hidden Power Fire and knock it out, because the Citrus Berry heals it just enough when I'm at level 95 for Steven Stone to sometimes not use a full restore on it. This lets me get to the Cradily, and from there it's mostly just more luck with Attract. Hopefully I have enough health to consistently re-establish Substitute and then make it through the Armaldo. Finally, at long last, check the clock, I make it to the Armaldo, and I am able to luck through, clocking in with a third Gulpin playthrough time of 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 53 seconds, just slightly under the 4-hour mark. I had 66 faults, finished the game at level 95, and I felt very disappointed because Tate and Liza really ruined things for this run. It doesn't feel like I've figured Gulpin out enough yet. So, back to the drawing board. How do we beat Tate and Liza consistently with a rash nature without having to train all the way to level 75? Well, once again, we're going to go back to my first playthrough and examine my moveset, because there I was using Ice Beam, and that really is the key. Before we get to Tate and Liza, let me go through a couple other things that are different. First of all, I found an Abra as my first encounter and caught it right away with my first Great Ball. This looks like it was manipulated, but it wasn't. I was just genuinely blown away. And that is the start of a series of very fortunate events. The luck is just going to continue. I didn't mention it in my previous run, but I lost a couple times to Brawly. This is possible if you do the fight at level 20. In this run, I fought every single available trainer except a couple guys that have Magikarp. This got me to level 22 before fighting him, but even here, I am just barely able to pull through without having a reset. Alright, so what about Watson? Well, here's how it goes. I don't get paralyzed on either the Voltorb or the Electrike. I'm able to use Encore to trap it using Howl, and then I use Sludge to knock it out after fully setting up. Then, Magneton. I use Encore strategy here in combination with Rock Smash, as I mentioned before, but I get very lucky. It's trapped in Encore, I lower its defense 2 times, and I knock it out without him using a potion. I still have green health left over, but I make what I think is objectively a mistake. I Encore the Manectric into using Quick Attack, which is not a great choice because this is its best move against me since I've set up with Amnesia. I was really worried here that I wasn't going to be able to knock it out because I'd bring it to low health and then he'd use a super potion and slowly finish off Gulpin. However, Sludge poisons and that knocks out the Manectric before Watson has a chance to use the super potion. So I defeat him on my first attempt. Okay, now a minor update. I'm going to teach Shockwave in the place of Encore. Then after completing the next section of the game, going all the way to Fall Arbor Town through Meteor Falls and then back around to Mauville City, I clean out all the trainers while I do this. When I arrive back in Mauville City, I use the move tutor to teach Rollout in the place of Sludge. Before, I figured I needed to keep the same type attack bonus move and upgrade it to Sludge Bomb, but this is not the case. Rollout and Shockwave are both useful against Maxie at the top of Mount Chimney, and then Rollout is going to be my go-to move against Flannery as well as Norman. And since my Gulpin is conveniently level 37 after defeating pretty much every trainer, I am going to learn Sludge Bomb just around the corner at level 39. I have one reset to Maxie, but access to Shockwave really does smooth things out here. Even defeating him on my second attempt felt very lucky. There's some other bumps in the road. I run into hiker Eric. I was actually intending to fight him, but turns out the ball toy has Psybeam, which is very bad for Gulpin, so I end up taking a blackout here. After that, it's a little bit bumpy against Flannery, but overall, no strategy changes in this section of the game. From there, Norman is difficult, as I've said before, but I am able to beat him with minimal time loss. This is where things have the potential to change in 2 different ways for Gulpin. Number 1, I can hold off teaching Ice Beam, but then teach it later on in the place of Sludge Bomb before taking on Tate and Liza to solve them. That way I'll have Shadow Ball as well as the Ice type move to manage all of their team members, and then I can squeeze through them at a lower level. The other potential way to pull off this strategy is replacing Rollout with Ice Beam and then just not having Rollout for Glacia later on. Since I'm leveling to such a ridiculously high level by the end of the game, I don't really need the Rock type move to defeat her. It just means I won't be able to beat her every single time I attempt the league. But in the end, I'll just be resetting after knocking out 1 or 2 of her Pokemon rather than knocking out 1 or 2 of Drake's Pokemon. This isn't a huge time loss in my opinion. I went back and forth in my mind about which was the more optimal strategy, and then eventually in this playthrough, I did decide to teach Ice Beam in the place of Rollout. This technically allows me to fight Tate and Liza at level 65, but I want to do it at level 66 after using 1 rare candy, again fluctuating growth rate. Now at this level, with the addition of the Nevermelt Ice Beam has a 64.8% chance to one-shot the Claydol, a guarantee on the Xatu, and then Shadow Ball is going to 2-shot both the Lunatone and the Solrock unless I get a critical hit. It's key to note here that the Citrus Berries that their 2 aces hold are the key to victory. If one of these items activates, it takes them out of potion range and allows me to 2-shot instead of 3-hitting. If I 3-hit one of them, it would be a loss because they would attack enough times to knock Gulpin out. As you can see here, because after using Shadow Ball, Soul Rock attacks, brings Gulpin down to a sliver of health, and then I knock it out. That was, in my 4th playthrough with Gulpin, a resetless Tate and Liza. Okay, so I've gotten very lucky until this point, and I was really happy with the playthrough up until now. It's at this point in the run that I just have to grind on the Elite Four over and over again. My target level for the end of the game, like I mentioned before, is 85, and I am going to be going into Steven Stone with Attract. There's a small difference during the League though. To fight Glacia, when I want to defeat her at level 93, I'm just going to teach Giga Drain in the place of Shadow Ball because I no longer need the Ghost type move. Its only use is beating Phoebe over and over for experience. With Giga Drain, the battle against Glacia is extremely easy because I can gain back health here and there. I also need Giga Drain for Wallace, so I might as well teach it earlier on, since the only move I need for Drake, of course, is Ice Beam. Same strategy for Wallace. I'm going to have Rest here in the place of Ice Beam, which means I purchased myself another Ice Beam TM from the game corner earlier into the playthrough, allowing me to get back to Hidden Power Fire and Ice Beam for Steven Stone. The reason I purchased it earlier on is because I knew that I was going to do a lot of blackouts throughout the run, so I saved up high-priced items and money earlier and then bought it as soon as I could, so then I could black out worry-free. Alright, so Steven Stone. I am starting this fight at 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 45 seconds. I have 30 faults in total. Let's see how long it takes me to get a good run. There are a bunch of paths to victory, as I've mentioned before. There is so much upside, but there is also a lot of downside, as you'll know. Really, what I'm eventually looking for is one of two things: a freeze on the Metagross, or the damage range that does not put it into full restore range after the Citrus Berry. Now, there is one small oversight with the strategy that I'm trying to use here. I purchased myself 4 Calcium to give me the damage range against the Claydol as soon as I arrived in Lily Cove City. If I had waited until later to use the Calcium, then I wouldn't have been able to improve my special attack stat because I would have maxed out my EVs fighting random wild Pokemon. So I had to do it as early into the playthrough as possible, which is another reason Abra early on is a great catch. The issue with doing this is that while it improves the Claydol damage range against Tate and Liza, it makes the Metagross damage ranges slightly less likely to work out in the player's favor, because Hidden Power Fire is now doing more damage, 41 to 48% damage. So if we put 2 of those max damage rolls together, that is 96% damage, leaving Metagross with only 4% hit points. It'll heal with a Citrus Berry, and then Steven Stone is just gonna full restore it anyways. Unless I freeze or critical hit from there, I will not be able to win. And I ended up having a lot of resets here. I failed to freeze the Metagross so many times in this run, I can't believe it. Anyway, I think there's one small update that we could make if I wanted to do Gulpin again. I don't want to do Gulpin again. I'm not going to, but I'm just going to tell you what the optimization would be. So if one of you wants to suffer through this, you can try it at the slightly lower level of 93. That gives Hidden Power Fire 39 to 46% damage per hit. It's going to be more likely to knock the Metagross out after the Citrus Berry without the full restore, without giving up the damage range to 3-shot the Metagross after it heals with the Citrus Berry, which is key. It's a very tricky thing to balance. If you're doing too much damage, then he heals with the full restore, but if you're doing too little damage, then he's going to heal with the full restore anyways, because you're going to require one more hit to knock out the Metagross, and then it's just going to knock out Gulpin because you take ridiculous amounts of damage every time it uses Psychic or Earthquake. There's one other small interaction that I do want to mention before I show you the time that I finally got, and that is against both the Aggron and the Metagross. If Gulpin is at low health, the best thing to do is just spam Ice Beam and hope for a freeze. Even if you don't get one, when you're at low health, the AI is seeing that pretty much any of its moves are going to knock Gulpin out. So there's a chance for the Aggron to use a move like Thunder and just miss, which did happen several times along the way. In this playthrough, I don't think the Metagross missed once with Meteor Mash, but that can also happen. I did also see it use Shadow Ball when it really shouldn't, and Gulpin survived with a single hit point, but that wasn't how I won. In the end, he just doesn't use the full restore, and I 3-shot with Hidden Power Fire. From there, I was in a pretty good position, and Attract plus Ice Beam and Hidden Power Fire are enough to manage both Cradily and Armaldo. For me, the 4th time is the charm. Gulpin clocks in with a final time of 3 hours, 44 minutes, and 51 seconds. With 58 faults, I don't know how these are distributed between resets and blackouts. I was having some software issues. I think because this run is really long, maybe I've missed something. I'll go back and check later. I was able to extract the game time though from the replay file. It was 12 hours and 43 minutes. Okay, that was exhausting, but I did it. I beat the game with Gulpin 3 times, and I played essentially 4 full playthroughs. I never completed the game with the yawn strategy. I do think that that strategy would be better if I ran a special attack boosting nature. After all of my testing, I am very convinced that that is the better nature for Gulpin to use. And that's really frustrating because it works against so much of the run where you're using physical attacks. Gulpin's first playthrough result earns it a placement in the middle of the Bruno tier, in between Love Disc and Delibird. Hilariously, this first stage poison type is significantly better than Delibird, since that Pokemon required double team to beat the game. Butterfree's gonna get a better result when I re-rank it, and Nosepass is irredeemable. So much so, to date, I still have not played a second playthrough with it, but I did do a second playthrough with both Nincada and Gulpin. I've completed 2 first stage Pokemon now in Emerald version, and both of them were really bad. Right now for follow-up playthroughs, my lowest threshold is times over 2 hours, and I think that's gonna have to change. Latios got a time of 2 hours and 3 minutes even, and Nincada got a time of 2 hours and 55 minutes. Gulpin feels like it should be in a completely different tier with its 3 hour and 44 minute time. But for now, it's gonna reside in the Bruno tier at the very end of the Pokemon considered possible. I do want to note here that there is a strategy that is possible for Shedinja, and it doesn't require inhuman luck. Ike the Killer figured it out, and it is really awesome. I am gonna have to move Shedinja at some point. Really what I want to do is add a tier here and call it the improbable tier, although Shedinja might escape that tier. But I'm done playing runs with Shedinja. I'm not going back to that Pokemon later. It was so painful to run. And if you want to see that, check out this video. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me and my team. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.